Welcome back. Our next session is titled Athlete, Actor, Activist. Please join me in welcoming on stage Ms. Ashwini Nachappa, former India athlete. She will be in conversation with Mr. KC Vijaya Kumar, sports editor, The Hindu.
Welcome, Ashwini.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's do a Bangalore conversation starter. So how was the drive from Koramangala to here?
Today being a Sunday, not bad at all. I reached in 15 minutes, so that's very, very good. It's like old Bangalore now.
But you had a strenuous weekend. You went to Coimbatore and you just took a flight back yesterday. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The way Ashwini is seen is as a shapeshifter. In the 80s when she was an athlete, I mean, there are many other athletes, demigods, women who beat multiple records. But they're extremely differential to the coach. Of course, I know there is a Guru Shishya Parampara in our mythology, in the way we approach sport and culture. She was respectful to hierarchy, but she spoke her mind. And she made an impression. And she added a touch of glamour to track and field events. She was referred to as the Flojo of Indian athletics. And she created a huge buzz then. And remember, these were days when Twitter was associated with birds, not what it is now. And even then, she was massive. So was it a very conscious decision to be different from the others?
In hindsight, I think it was a conscious decision because you needed some kind of life into the stadium. Because for me, it was always about standing out from the rest of the crowd.
Okay.
In terms of performance, in terms of behavior, in terms of appearance. And I think all that is just my personality. I didn't deliberately at that point in time. My sister was already in the US. She went on a sports scholarship. So I would get these flamboyant tracks and, and I didn't have any inhibitions. I just wore it and ran. So probably became a trendsetter, as most of you, defined me then. It just felt good to be different on the field and to, complement it with a good performance.
And you ran pretty fast. So let's digress on that. There's this huge, discussion, debate over Kambala recently. People have been compared to Usain Bolt. What's your take on that?
I think it's sad to equate Usain Bolt's performance with the Kambala race. Of course, I've watched Kambala live as one of the guests a couple of years back. Both are about sprinting, both about speed. But to compare and equate it to Usain Bolt's, I don't think that's fair. What these two boys have achieved is remarkable under those circumstances. And as a sport, as a Kambala sport, it has to be, recognized and commended upon the performance that they have created. But I don't think for those two, it is unfair to ask them to come in for a trial just because they won a race, make them a hero overnight, and supposing he had gone in for the side trials and didn't perform a 9.5, which, athletes are training 365 days for 10, 12 years to, just shave off 0.001 second. If he hadn't done it, all of you all would have just put him down. So I think that's an unfair comparison.
Actually, you won a slew of medals. SAF Games, Nepal, 1994, 2 silvers. SAF Games, Bangladesh, 1986, 2 silvers. Pakistan, 1988, 3 golds. And then in Beijing, Asian Games 1990, silver in the 4 into 100 meter relay. You participate in World Championships at Rome and in Tokyo. Member of the 4 into 100 meter relay squad. Arjuna awardee, Olympian. And you're also remembered for this rivalry with PT Usha. You said, I want to beat her, and you did that. Could you just relive the rivalry?
I was a rival against my sister on the field when I ran the 200 meters against her. I think once you're on the field, everybody's a rival. Once you're off the field, you're a friend.
Yeah.
And unless you have that, you really cannot perform. And to beat Usha Usha was the finest athlete Asia has ever produced, even till today. There is no question about that.
Yeah.
And to actually beat her required another level of training. And I think I was one of the only athletes at that point in time who did mind training.
Okay.
It was not known. Sports psychology was not known. There was a sports psychologist who watched me. I would always come second to Usha. Whenever we ran at the Nationals, it was understood she comes first and I come second. But the sports psychologist, Dr. Rupan Das, had come down from States and he was watching me train at the Continuous Stadium.
Okay.
Then we had the cinder track. We didn't have the synthetic track and there was a velodrome around it. So you remember how it used to be. So after my training, he came down and says, would you like to go through a session of mind training? And without batting an eyelid, I said, sure, why not? And on the velodrome, on an inclined position, he took me through sessions. And the difference was I never ever ran against Usha thereafter. I ran against the time I set for myself.
Okay.
And for that, it required immense amount of mind training, of visualizing every race probably 1,000 times with the timings that you set off the field in an alpha state before you actually go onto the field.
Okay.
And when I ran those two races beating her, it was not against Usha, it was against the time I set for myself, and everything fell into motion then.
You also did a movie, which is pretty rare, movie about yourself, your life story, called Ashwini, directed by Mr. Mowgli. We recently had a Mary Com, which was headlined by Priyanka Chopra, but how was it different to play yourself? Was it easy? Was it difficult?
It was extremely difficult, one, because I've never been on stage.
Okay.
I've never acted even in my school days. And secondly, because it was a new language.
Okay.
Telugu was not my language.
So it was originally made in Telugu, then dubbed into Tamil.
It was dubbed into Tamil and Hindi then. And the other thing is, I was not good at dancing. So my first instruction when I actually said, I'll do the movie, in fact, first I said no. When Ramaji Rao came to the stadium, it was in Nehru Stadium, and I had just beaten Usha, so my photos went all over the press and magazines, and then they sat, watched my training, and then they said, asked my coach if I could talk to me for about 10 minutes. When I went in and he says, we're looking to do a film. We didn't know whether it was cricket or athletics, but we think we'll freeze on you. Would you like to do a film? And I just took my bag and I said, are you mad? And I just walked off because I had no clue who Ramaji Rao was then. But they persisted, and in fact, they actually recorded my race beating Usha without anybody's permission.
Okay.
And they had all the footage ready, so they were very, very keen. And then they came back to me a couple of times, and then I said, okay, I'll give you, after my Asian Games, I'll give you 40 days. So in 40 days, I did that film, my part of it. It was good. I still remember the first scene was only running. I had no dialogue. I said, I'll run. It was a different track. I was never treated as a film star.
Okay.
I was looked upon as a sports person. The best part of it is I worked all my 5 films with the same director, different producers, and almost practically the same unit, from my lightman to my makeup man, everybody. It was like a family because for me, between 5:30 and 6:30, there was no shooting.
Okay.
It was always 40 minutes of, kind of conditioning exercises. So even my lightman and everybody would jog. Sometimes the producer, if they're on the set, would jog with me, would do exercise, stretch up, those kind of things. So it was good. I mean, that journey was good.
But you didn't pursue it beyond a point. You acted, I think, totally 5 films.
I did 5 films, and I did 1 in Kannada, it wasn't my cup of tea. I mean, money was good, but I think that phase in life was over. I had to do much more things. Things that connected me with sport, things that connected me with children. And in fact, when I was expecting my first child, I was still shooting, and I said, but it just happens. I think every decision, if I look back, whether I was in the bank, I went at 8:30 in the morning. I worked for 16 years with Vijaya Bank. I went one morning at 8:30. Before my stenographer came, I typed my resignation, gave it to my AGM, and I walked out. I did the film. At the fifth film, I said, I'm not doing it anymore. I refused all the offers. So it's just been, I think God's been good. Every phase that has come along, I've done it well, attempted it well, with all my heart, and just move on.
I mean, you also broke a lot of stereotypes about Coorg. Coorg is about coffee, guys in the army. It's about hockey players. So you are the first athlete, the big athlete from Coorg. And now you have Rohan Bopanna, who's a tennis player. You have Ashwini Nachappa, who's a squash player. So do you think you kind of had an influence there in terms of turning it around?
I think Coorg has produced a number of international sports persons besides hockey too. Of course, a large chunk of it comes from hockey. And then the armed forces. Yeah. But as a race, I think it was a natural, instinct for every, they say a Kodava is either born with a hockey stick or a gun. And I think that's why the Kodava family hockey tournament is the largest in the world. So it's a natural phenomenon for athletes. But sadly today you don't see number of athletes or number of badminton players or number of tennis players who are taking up in the small district.
Okay. And you're doing a bit there, the Karumbaya Academy of Learning and Sports, Negonikopa?
Yes, and I think as an athlete in my journey, I've, whether it was Usha, Shiny, Mercy, any of those athletes in my time, really we all got an opportunity to, get a government job before we finished our 12th grade. I still remember Vijaya Bank absorbed me. I hadn't even got my 12th grade results. And they didn't pursue an education. I think in that batch, I was the only graduate who, did correspondence and tried to pursue an education. And I felt it was very, very important that an athlete pursues, because education and sports should go hand in hand. It's an integral part of education. Sport, being a very integral, and I'm a product of school games, and I don't see why we should not nurture the young children into playing sport. Forget about becoming Olympic medalists. Into playing sport. We are so restrictive in our approach, and that's the reason both my husband and me decided to do something besides a sports academy, but also an education platform. Today we have 850 kids across, the nation who comes there from NRI students. We have 3 core sport that we run in the academy, that is athletics, hockey, and shooting. It's one of the smallest district. Probably in 15 years, we've come a long way where our kids today, we have 6 renowned shooters who can go for the nationals. Hopefully in another 2 years, they qualify for the Indian team. We have about 6 to 8 players who've moved into the Sports Authority of India in hockey, in the junior academy. We have athletes who've come and gone at the state and national level. So it's a continuous effort. And I think for me, it is not about, looking at the top. It's easy to grab somebody at top and say that we'll give you this much, you just train. But actually to create the base of the pyramid as large as possible to ensure that champions start emerging out of choice and not chance, I guess.
Do you believe enough is being done at the grassroots of sport in India? Or is it that someone does very well, achieves, and then they're recognized in retrospect?
Sadly, in our country, it is that way. In fact, the rewards that we give our sports stars is the highest compared to even the biggest sporting nations. Is the highest. So there's no doubt about it. But when you look at Tier 2, Tier 3, much needs to be done. And I think the intent now with the Prime Minister, actually leading this, saying that we must build sporting communities, especially across borders, to ensure that they don't take up extremism. Somebody is actually talking about sport. And things have come into play, whether it's the Khelo India Games, school games. Today, the Khelo India University Games have started. Back in our days, the school games and the university games, in fact, the university games was big That's what fed the Indian team. And that's what's happening worldwide. Unfortunately, there was, a gap, and then nothing happened at the university levels for various reasons.
I think it's still happening in Kerala. No? And
It's
University
happening
Games is pretty good, big there.
Yeah, so now it has,
Okay.
there's a kind of a small structure in place. And I feel proud to tell you all that when Mr. Modi came into power, I think making sport in India was the first presentation from the foundation we gave in. And a few changes we have seen thereafter, whether it's
Okay.
the Khelo India Games or whether it is, because even today when you look at Indian sport, we are looking at the outside world to get in every kind of faculty.
Okay.
Whether it's a sports psychologist or nutritionist or anybody across, we are looking at only the outside world. And once you announce Make in India, it's time we re-look and revisit sport and not go back to what happened 70 years ago.
Like it happened in cricket, even you ran a campaign to cleanse sports administration in India. Could you just say something about that? How you worked? When you kind of fought the system.
Well, a handful of us got together, I think 10 Olympians got together and said, let's start a movement, especially during the Commonwealth Games, when so much of corruption was happening. Let's try and clean the process. At that point in time, I think most of you all remember every sports federation, including even now, the stronghold is there because it's all politically led personals in every sports federations. So, and what was happening on ground, in fact, in Nehru Stadium, children would come up to us and say, Madam, हमें ticket ही नहीं मिला हमको देखने के लिए हम लोग यहाँ रोज, we train every day and we don't get to see games of that nature. If you don't allow young children to see what is happening in the stadium where they train, such a big event, how would you inspire them? How would you inspire? And then tickets, the stadiums would be empty, but they would say tickets are sold out. So there was a big campaign, and I remember going to every political party head, from Gadkari to Rahul Gandhi to everybody, trying to say that please change this. And in about 3-4 days, you saw all the stadiums getting filled in, and but there was massive corruption, and I feel happy that the 10 of us, unfortunately, not many sportsmen want to speak up.
Okay.
For various reasons, I understand you're a competing athlete, but for a non-competing athlete who's retired, I think there's much that can be done for our athletes.
Okay. Now, why is it that at the Olympic level, we tend to struggle a bit, India tends to struggle a bit? I mean, medals are reaped at the Asian level, at the Commonwealth level, but when it comes to the Olympics, there seems to be, like guys or girls who beat a particular qualification mark, they cannot replicate it when the real deal happens.
I think the narrative has changed, Vijay. In our days, if you see, if you go back to from 1920s to up to 2004 or so, we won about 11 Olympic medals, 2/3 of which came from hockey.
Yes.
Right? Then Leander started the ball rolling. Then we had Karnan Malleshwari.
Then the shooters came in.
Then Rathod came in. And then Abhinav really transformed what sports were. Back till then, I think it was us. It was a traditional sport being represented at the Olympics, which was a few athletes and the men hockey team. Today, almost 68 have already qualified for the Olympic Games, which has both men and the women hockey team has qualified. We have almost 15 shooters, and all between the age of 16 to 21, young kids, are qualifying for the Olympic Games. So it's no more about qualification. The narrative has changed because of that gold medal. Everybody, and then followed by Sakshi Malik and, Punya and all these, they have transformed communities from where they come from. And that's why we are able to see what is happening today. It's not just the number of participation that has increased, but I think everybody is vying for a medal. And that has changed from just merely qualifying to actually winning a medal. And the nation has actually questioned, can we win a medal this time? So that has changed. And much has to be done. I mean, the demographics of India, and there are much larger issues to be addressed. Sports is not, part of our education system. It's not in the concurrent list. Too many things that happens within federations. So there are a lot of issues that has to be tackled.
What about athletics as such? Because I think the last medals were won by Norman Pritchard
Yes.
way back in 1900. So it's about 120 years. And why is that? I mean,
Just to give you a small example, I think 1904, the marathon was run in 3.5 hours. 2012, the marathon was run in 2 hours, 08 minutes. People are trying to break the 2-hour barrier in this Olympics. And if you go to see Jesse Owens in 1936, when he ran 10.3, to what Usain Bolt achieved with a 9.757,
57,
if you actually take the 10.3 to 9.7, it's almost 13 feet to 14 feet in 100 meters.
Okay.
That's the, distance that you would cover in that amount of time. What has changed? Are we a superhuman? No, we are not. But science and technology has played an immense role. When Jesse Owens ran, it was a cinder track, like how we all ran.
Yeah.
Okay? The amount of energy that is used on cinder surface is enormous as against the synthetic surface where Usain and today's athletes are running. The technology used, the spikes is customized to your weight, to the way you run. Today you have swimming gears, full body gears to ensure you, break that 0.1 second. Blood samples are taken from earlobes every evening to see what is the kind of training that you can do the following morning. So the amount of science and technology that has come into sport and the science of performance is something that India needs to invest in. And that is not happening. We are only looking at a select few athletes doing everything that can, but we're really not investing in the science and technology of sport.
So when you have these heroes and heroines in athletics, like P.T. Usha was there, you were there, so many athletes are coming up. Why isn't it that you have, the base is widening? Why is the base still a bit smallish?
Well, there are multiple reasons for it. I mean, I can't really pinpoint one. I'm surprised that I recently got to know that my 200-meter state record still exists. After 30 years, it's still there. I would like young children to beat that record. I mean, what I did in 1987, 88 cannot still exist today.
Yeah.
That shows that, I'm happy people like Hima Das has come in, Duti Chand has come in, against all odds.
Yeah.
Today, federations may take all the credit saying we, identified. Really, no. I mean, you must identify and recognize those grassroots level coaches who brought those children from really poor backgrounds. When I ran, I couldn't afford a pair of spikes. I remember my sports teacher, who was from Ceylon, brought a pair of spikes for me. MP Ganesh gave me a pair of tracksuits to run with. We used to run bare feet. We've all come up that way. It was really a struggle, but today everything is available. The media is catching on to everything. Everything is at your doorsteps. But I truly feel that while the money is there in various schemes, the intent of the government is seen in small ways, whether it's a Khelo India. The real change should come from federations. The mandate of federations is to promote sport, not to become event managers. And I think that is not happening.
Is there nepotism there in federations?
You know better. I mean, everybody knows, everybody reads what's happening in federations. And I think, except for cricket, that has created pathways for its sports persons.
Yeah.
No other federation has created pathways for its sports. There are many, many athletes who have won the Olympics, who have won Asian medals, are really in doldrums, literally. So there are no pathways created. And I've also been, suggesting to the government here as well as to the center that sports and education must come into the concurrent list.
Yeah.
Because if a sports code is, announced and adopted, our state says, we don't want the sports code here. Why should we take the sports code? So if you're trying to bring in certain change, certain accountability, people don't want to accept it. And I think unless the will of the government is there to hold federations accountable, because the amount of money federations are doled out to send athletes to perform is enormous. But at the grassroots, the promotion of sport is zero, barring one or two sports.
Is it because a lot of politicians are there in the sports federations, even including the BCCI? I mean, there's so many who have a political affiliation, who's part of a party.
I don't
Does
mind
that
having
upset-
political affiliations as long as you know what sport is about. If, you can't have a politician who knows nothing about sport. We sit there and dictate terms. And then the bureaucrat will, kind of list out these are the things that has to be done without consultations of sports persons on the ground, on the field. So that is a no-no. I think that needs to change. For all of you who are in Bangalore knows what's happening with the Kantirava Stadium, right? We have Harris on one side as the president of the Football Association here. We have, till recently, we had Dr. Parmeshwar as the Athletic Federation. And then they bring, you know who brought in the current, who's that? Muthappa Rai as the president of the Athletic Association. Nobody has ever seen his face. The athletes have seen. What are the issues that are in the ground? It's been 6 years, athletes weren't allowed to use, because athletics is the only event where 33 events are played, right? Men, women, 33. For boys, 33 for girls. Which, can we do it in a hockey stadium? Can we do it in a football stadium? It's not possible. So when a stadium is built for a purpose, we all coexisted. During our times, cycling nationals used to happen. Santosh Trophy, football used to happen. We all coexisted. But for one sport to actually take away and ruin one sport is something that I was against, and I think we all filed a PIL, and the court gave us relief. Today, young kids are able to use the facility for all their disciplines, for all their events. So somebody needs to fight it. I mean, I don't have children in athletics, but I feel sorry that people who run federations must do this job. It's not us trying to, firefight this and work for the athletes here.
What about the drug specter in terms of doping in athletics and doping in general in sport in India? I mean, when the USSR broke up, a lot of coaches came in. There were whispers about Patiala, whispers about people training abroad. I have covered events at Kantirava where I've seen syringes in the restroom. Is there an end to it? Is there a solution to it?
It's very alarming today. I mean, we are third on the WADA list, which is absolutely, I mean, we rather, send the Indian team and train them in Russia than training them here. Because all our Indian team, especially the athletes, are going only to the, countries which is known for it, And then the sad part is that there are some 6,000 to 8,000 drugs. Every month, WADA releases the number of drugs that you can't take. For you and I, as a normal person, we wouldn't know which are the drugs we're not supposed to take. I remember, I don't know whether you remember Aparna Pauper, because she had cold, she took Sedzine, and it, showed up, and she was banned for 2 years. But today's athletes, like our voters, are quite smart. And I do not agree when athletes say, "Mujhe nahi malum tha." I do not agree, because if you go into any of the Indian camps today, there are pamphlets, there's education that is happening on what are the drugs. There are sports scientists sitting there, a few of them. It's all there available. But only the athlete gets caught. Why not the coach? Why not the federation be held accountable? Because the nexus is there.
Okay. So there's no end to it?
Well, I always say that.
As they say about the Tour de France, everyone is doing it, so...
Doping is worldwide phenomena. And I think WADA is like the BCCI. It's a very close club of a few nations. So you have to see, your lobby is good or not. if Ben Johnson can get caught, why not Carl Lewis? So the Canadian lobby wasn't as good as the
Yes,
American
yeah.
lobby. So that you know, it happens there. But I think it's a conscious decision that an athlete must take,
Okay.
whether you want to be clean or you want to win at all cost. And I think winning at all cost is what we've come to today.
Okay.
Irrespective, you know, the fear of getting caught is not there.
Okay. Like, to be honest, if we get a news report saying a weightlifter has won a medal somewhere, the first reflex is he clean? You know, it's a very cynical way to react to a sporting achievement, but the reflex is he or is she clean? I mean,
I'm off to Delhi tomorrow for the NADA committee, so I have to see how many athletes are there tomorrow who are going through these, and the
Okay.
inquiry starts. So it's quite alarming. What's happening in the junior section is, as you rightly said, we've covered all this.
yes.
A young athlete who is 14, 15 doesn't even know whether the coach is administrating just, you know,
Yeah.
what he is giving him. So the toilets are filled
Filled with
it.
syringes, yeah.
A small example I'll give you. We conducted the state championship here because I was also the president of I'm also the president of the Bangalore Urban District Athletic Association. When we conducted the state championship, on the final day, I requested a few NADA officials to be there for the finals. It was under 14, under 16, and under 18 championship for school kids up to 18, you know, PUC. There were a number of athletes who didn't run the 100 finals, 200 finals. The result will come after 15 days. But the fact that the NADA officials were taking 10 samples that
Yeah.
I had identified, and I said, you know,
Okay.
just take the samples and we'll see what happens. And they did it free of cost. They said, we will do it for you. They came all the way with the entire setup. They had to get a special room. All that was done. Young athletes didn't turn up for the finals of the races.
Okay.
And who guides a 13, 14-year-old? It's the coach.
Coach, yeah.
It's the coach. So it is alarming what is happening here.
Have you spoken to the sports ministry regarding this?
Yes, I think much has been done.
Okay.
It's being done. It's a continuous effort, you know. It's an education that everybody should be part of. It's not just drugs in sport, it's drugs all over.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of education should start from school itself.
Ashwini, are you happy with corporate support for sport in India? Do you think they're doing enough as part of CSR or just not?
As part of CSR, I would say no.
Okay.
When they come in, if you see, because today sport is a growing industry in our country. We have 15 leagues in our country today,
Yes.
which is extremely, extremely good, because it also gives opportunity for rural, not so well-off kids to
Yeah.
actually come and make a career out of it. So that's a good part about it. But when you look at something like I am struggling with in my hometown,
Yeah.
I can't provide the visibility that a corporate will look at what you get in a city compared to what you get in a rural place. Yeah. And for sport, for anybody to win a medal at the state, if you start at
Yeah.
the age of say 10, 11, to win a medal at the state takes about 5 years. You know, you may have exceptional cases, but it takes 5. To win an Olympic medal or to represent the country at the Olympics will take anything between 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But it should not be looked at winning. I think what we need to look at sports is part of education. It is a part of education, and it has to come in at what we are creating in Coog, in one of the smallest districts in the country, to have a school like that have an infrastructure like that, is that ecosystem is replicated in every small towns in India. And only then, I'm not looking at elite athletes, because they will anyway get into the system, they will get into the national camps, they will have everything at their, beck and call. But at this, how do you go in there? It's like my journey, and it still continues. It was hand to mouth with 2 athletes, my sister and myself as international athletes, with one man, my dad, the only earning member. It was a struggle. And today, many athletes are still struggling to reach. You take Hima Das. Did anybody know of Hima Das's struggle? Did anybody know of Duti Chand's struggle?
Yeah.
It was enormous. I mean, the kind of support, it's only because of the support from home
Yeah.
and the coach at that level did we all emerge. And that needs to change. You need to identify at a young age, nurture them. We are not even doing capacity building programs for our athletes. Forget the elite, even here we are not doing.
Okay.
So there's so much that one needs to do.
Do you think the competitive populism hurts? Like an athlete, say from Hyderabad, wins something. All the states, southern states, gang up together and say, okay, we'll give this much land, we'll give this much money. Do you think even that
I
kind of
feel it's ridiculous.
softens the athlete?
It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I also, in fact, I was heading a part of a committee which was re-looking at sporting awards in our country.
Okay.
Sadly, it's not been taken up, where an athlete for one performance gets multiple awards.
Yes.
Right from an Arjuna Award to the Padma Bhushan. I'm saying, then where is
The yardstick.
yardstick? If you get a particular award for a particular performance, the highest award, you must perform in the next 2 years to get a next award. You can't get for one award all the awards. I mean, today that's something that needs to change, because I think if you can have awards for Tier 2,
Okay.
it'll be great, because that'll be a great boost right at the state and the national level to see that from the Khelo India Games, they're doing, I think the government is doing much for the medalist to be awarded scholarship funded by the Ministry of Youth Affairs. So those are things that is happening, but I think recognizing them far more needs to be done.
If there are 3 things you could change about Indian sport, if you had the power, what would you do?
Well, if I had the powers, first of all, make it mandatory for sports to be part of our education system and not a once-a-week program. We had young political leaders talk before the show, and I think for every we have the youth population here, and unless you have taken part in sport and game, there is no way to approach life in a manner that should be done. Especially in today's scenario, young kids, if you see, nobody other than tuition is a huge industry, gadgets has become another thing. Young kids, if you take even in the Montessori level, they're so well versed with gadgets, but you ask them to do one thing with coordination, just put small hurdles or just make them jump, they're unable to do. There is no coordination. The lack of coordination is amazing. The kind of attention span, every child is expected to be a 95%. I mean, I run a school, and I had this one boy, Manjunath, who was an extremely good hurdler. He was a state junior champion also at that time, under 14 and under 16. And he wasn't that good in class. He was an average student. And then my math teacher, Sanil, comes up to me and says, "Ma'am, Manjunath has done very well in math."
Okay.
It's only because he became such a hero in the class for winning this medal, he thought that he had to stand out, that confidence came in, and he actually put that effort into the studies. And I think for every child, the learning from sport, I always tell my teachers this, what you learn on the play field cannot be learned within the 4 walls of the classroom.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Ashwini. So we'll throw the floor to the audience. Questions, please. Yeah, the lady there. Yeah. You. Yeah.